unbelievable that old Biff could have chosen that particular date. It could mean that point in time inherently contains some sort of cosmic significance, almost as if it were the temporal junction point for the entire space-time continuum. On the other hand, it could just be an amazing coincidence.
Very familiar words from a series of films I'm betting most of you are familiar with. But the words of Dr. Emmett Brown and the Back to the Future franchise are far from the only fictional works centered around time travel. Indeed, this trope of science fiction has been a very popular mainstay of the genre for almost 2 centuries. It has been a fascination and obsession with mankind for longer than anyone can remember. But time travel is simply a fantasy, right? It couldn't actually be done. Or could it? There in fact exists an incident that many say prove the idea of traveling through the 4th dimension is not only possible, but in fact has already been done. Strap in, folks, because we're about to take you through an extremely strange series of events that since has become known as the Saga of John Titor.
Our story begins in the early morning hours of July 29th, 1998, as the popular radio station Coast to Coast Broadcasting was prepping to begin their daily show. Coast to Coast was mostly known for dealing in topics such as wild conspiracies and paranormal happenings, so it wasn't surprising to listeners when the host, a man named Art Bell, opened his segment with an invitation of sorts. He invited anyone that was a time traveler, specifically those from the future, to call into the radio station and share their stories. Now, this was done mostly as a light-hearted affair, and for hours Bell entertained dozens of people who shared wild predictions and forecasts of the future they said they hailed from. But in the midst of the eye-rolling fun came a story by fax that seemed to stand out from all the others. The message read as follows in paraphrase.
Dear Art, I had to send you a message when I heard all of the other so-called time travelers call in. Most of them claim to be beyond the year 2500, but I feel the need to explain. The science of traveling through the 4th dimension was actually invented in the year 2034. The results of fusion reactor research allowed scientists at CERN to produce what they called a hyperspace singularity engine. It operates on the principle of rotating these singularities around a magnetic field. By altering the speed and direction of these rotational shifts, one can therefore travel both forwards and backwards through the 4th dimension, otherwise known as the time barrier. The concept of time itself can be understood through the imagery of connected lines. For the sake of discussion, let's focus on traveling backwards. When one goes back in time, they travel on their original set timeline. When the singularity engine is deactivated, the traveler has now in fact started a brand new timeline, thus creating a new dimensional universe within the fabric of space-time. In order to return to one's original point of origin, you must arrive a split second farther back, and immediately throw the engine into a forward rotational shift without deactivating it. Now, these rotational shifts have a number of different outcomes that are possible within a given trip. One possibility is actually meeting your alternate self within a nominal timeline. I've done this on occasion. I once took a younger doppelganger for a ride before returning him back to the historical spot I found him. Another possibility is altering past or future history in the new universe you have just created. Most of these changes are subtle in my experience. For example, some models of vehicles or books with different published dates. There was even the case of an entire skyscraper that was wiped from existence near a place I knew in New York. Yet another point of contention is the compensation for the rotational orbit of the Earth. One must adjust the engine's locational bearings in order to remain on the moorings of the planet itself. Now we come to the crux of why I am here. You see, Art, in the multiple expeditions taken in forward motion from the year 2036, nearly all have reported that they hit a brick wall, so to speak, in the year 2564 AD. In their words, they were surrounded by nothing but blackness and silence. As a result, most time travelers have taken up a mission to find out exactly when things went bad. After a number of field tests, it seems that most consensus centers around the year 2000 AD. Our mission is to go into the past, throw forward the engine as specified, and create subsequent new timelines to see if the same results are achieved in 2564. That year is the clinch pin. I'm currently testing a few theories of my own, which are ongoing. From my observation, the colloquial Y2K incident does prove to be a disaster. A number of casualties are reported as people try to reach a warmer climate. A short while later, martial law is declared and the government seeks to maintain permanent power, but their structure collapses when they fail to reinstitute global power grids. This, save for a lone facility near Denver, which is able to boot up power for a short period before being completely decimated by thousands of rioters. After this disaster, it prompts many to abandon the old established institutes. A few years after the disaster, the United States is effectively remade into a communal government system after many parts of the Constitution are tweaked and twisted. Global havoc ensues as China successfully invades Taiwan, Israel gains total dominance in the Middle East, and Russia suffers nuclear catastrophe. Art, a major part of my mission now, is to test my theories as I firmly believe that the nuclear holocaust that results from the Middle East war, and specifically a weapon set off by the nation of Iraq, is what potentially leads to the damaged timeline and the apparent doomsday scenario witnessed in 2564. I ask that you and your listeners pray for our success in securing a future beyond that said year.
We must remember that this was 1998, and the looming threat of the mentioned Y2K bug still held a reasonable grip of fear on much of the populace. Many computers of the time were formatted in a 2-digit system, so 1999 simply became 99, and when the year 2000 rolled around, the analog systems would interpret this as 2 zeros, making the digitized counters think it was the year 1900, thus throwing the world into chaos. As stated, the facts seemed to stand out amongst the myriad of other calls and messages Coast to Coast was receiving. All the others were somewhat fanciful takes, clearly playing into the whole pseudo-science of the topic, but the mysterious facts had a more grounded tone, which is why it gave it more credence to many listeners. 2.5 years later, the mysterious message delivered to the Coast to Coast radio show would be resurrected. As the companion website forum to the popular broadcast, aptly named Post to Post, many respondents to the website would begin to discuss their favorite broadcast topics. A certain poster named John Titor appeared on the forum. In his intro post, the man known as John Titor claimed he was from the year 2036 and that he traveled in a time machine manufactured by General Electric. The machine was powered by a dual singularity engine, much like the one mentioned by the mysterious fax sent in nearly 3 years prior. The poster went on to say that he was in the year 2001 to retrieve an IBM 5100 computer system first produced in the year 1975. The IBM 5100 was an early portable computer unit with a 5-inch monitor. It could process APL and basic programming code. However, this feature was a hidden function known only to a handful of engineers. According to John Titor, the 5100 model would somehow prevent what he called a Unix timeout in the year 2038. He said that this particular year would be a reincarnated Y2K. Many digital systems calculate time as the number of seconds that have passed since the year 1970. This information is stored as a 32-bit integer. This process can only continue until the 1st of January in the year 2038, when the integer bits reset back to 0, again throwing the world into global chaos. As John's posts continued, He relayed that his time device was installed within an old Corvette. He posted low-quality photos of the supposed device and stirred up a fair amount of buzz. Now this is where many detractors really go in on the entire John Titor affair, citing, perhaps fairly, that the individual probably watched way too much of the Back to the Future movies, in which the time machine is also embedded in a flashy vehicle, a DeLorean in the case of the films. Questions rolled in as to how the time apparatus actually worked, but to much disappointment, Titor cited extremely vague and, some say, nonsensical techno-babble, which few understood. He went to post supposed sophisticated diagrams and schematics of the machine, but this too was met with skepticism. But there were also firm believers that maintained that the only reason the world survived the Y2K bug was because of John Titor. They also contend that Titor might be responsible for other time anomalies such as the Mandela effect, changing several historical events that have left a dimensional imprint on many people in the form of misremembered memories of events they swore took place. This seemed to be confirmed by Titor himself, as he stated that our world before the year 2000 was swiftly headed into the direction of his timeline. But because of his actions, our dimension averted many of the catastrophes that plagued his universe. Amongst many of Titor's predictions included a second American Civil War, nuclear conflict in the Middle East, a world pandemic, in this case Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, and a worldwide communal government that resulted. Now, many of these predictions did not come true. However, many cite that because of the Titor's intervention, he either changed many events or prevented them altogether. And looking at our modern world, it's easy to believe that perhaps Titor didn't stop many of his predictions. Maybe he just delayed them. One vivid account tells the story of a woman named Pamela Moore. She first encountered John Titor on the forums like many others. She became deeply fascinated by the man's claims and aggressively pursued his correspondence on and off the forums. She claims that Titor shared many more visions and predictions of his future world, and that the two grew quite close over their email exchanges. Pamela says that John presented her a special song that would be invoked between the two of them as a passcode, so she would know that she was talking to the real John Titor. As recently as 2016, Pamela says she has been communicating with John intermittently, and that the last thing he sent was a special package containing 2 letters and a CD. But the exact contents of these items remain a mystery, as Pamela refuses to divulge that information. The John Titor saga has obviously been subjected to much scrutiny, and there is a laundry list of names that have come forward as being the ones behind the John Titor mystery. Among them are Joseph Matheny, a former employee of Adobe and early Netscape. He claims that the John Titor project was an early ARG created by him and an associated group until after the year 2000. After the posts made on the forum fizzled out, Matheny pressured the group to tell the truth about their involvement, but many disavowed or disappeared altogether. Then there was Larry Haber, a lawyer who claimed to represent a man named Titor and his wife. Haber went on to form a business named the John Titor Foundation. Many claim that it was Haber and his brothers who started up the John Titor phenomena, but nothing can be corroborated, and to this day, Haber refuses to answer questions relating to the incident. March 24, 2001 would mark the day when John Titor would make his final public communication with the world. In no uncertain terms, he lays out why more time travelers don't reveal themselves. He states that humanity is inherently a doubting and fearful creature. If someone from the future would openly reveal themselves, they would probably be met with disbelief, fear, and even violence. He states that he could go back countless times and start countless alternate timelines, all to be met with the same grisly fate, all because mankind refuses to change its attitudes. He states that he often wonders if the human race is beyond saving. It's both a somber and insightful final post. It puts the state of our world and our civilization into stark perspective.
So what is the truth behind the enigma of John Titor? Was he a traveler from another time trying to change the outcome of a hopeless future? But in fact, in even asking such a question, perhaps we're missing the point altogether. For many, John Titor provided a voice in the night that gave them insight as well as hope. That perhaps someday, mankind will invent the tools that will enable us to seek a second chance, to right some wrongs that have been perpetuated throughout our long history. But as John himself once stated, it might already be too late. And with that, we'll leave you to ponder on your own and come up with your own conclusions. We'd like to think that John might have included in his final post a similar sentiment that echoed the phrase, question everything and trust no one. Until next time.